Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Robert Glassman, and I am a lawyer with the law firm of Panish, Shea, and Boyle here in Los Angeles. And on behalf of our entire legal team, I would just like to welcome you to this very important town hall meeting here at the Marriott in Woodland Hills. Needless to say, a lot has happened ever since the Southern California Gas Company indicated that it detected a leak for the first time on October 23rd of last year in its Aliso Canyon storage facility in Porter Ranch. Seems like every day there is a new development. And when you're dealing with an environmental crisis like this that affects your community, your families, your homes, your businesses, your pets, it's always evolving. It's always evolving. And that's why we're here tonight. We're here tonight so you can hear from the experts on these latest and recent developments. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from our elected officials, members from our legal team, and medical experts who are all going to be sharing with you their perspectives and insights on this issue. And before I introduce you to our panel, I just want to address a question that you may be asking yourselves about us up here, about our legal team. And you may be asking yourselves, what makes us different than all the other lawyers out there? Well, what we've decided to do for purposes of this litigation is we've decided to start a coalition and form an alliance of highly respectable law firms who have all decided to come together to fight for you. And we have one objective in this case. And our objective is to shut these wells down and get the good people of Porter Ranch, the neighboring communities, what they deserve from the Southern California Gas Company. And when you ask yourselves, what kind of lawyer do you want representing you during these difficult times, you need to look for the lawyers who have the resources to take on a case like this against the gas company. You need to look for the lawyers who have a proven track record litigating and actually trying cases against the gas company. And our team satisfies that criteria. In fact, one of the primary reasons why my law firm is involved in this case is because of our proven track record successfully litigating and trying cases against this very same entity, the Southern California Gas Company. We've been battling these guys before down in the trenches. We know who their lawyers are, we know who their insurance companies are, we know how they operate, and we know how to beat them. We've never lost against these guys. And in addition to our experience litigating and trying cases against the gas company, our lawyers also have extensive experience battling other large major utilities. We've represented victims from the San Bruno gas explosion cases up north against PG&E, and our legal team also is currently helping out victims and businesses that have been affected by the BP oil spill down south. And I just want to end this little spiel by saying this before I introduce you to everyone. The size, the clout, the financial strength of our opponents, of the negligent companies and entities that cause harm to our clients and cause harm to the environment, never deters us from seeking justice. And I encourage you to stick around after the presentation and get to know us a little bit more, get to know who we are and how we can help you. And we're going to be sticking around after the presentation. We're also going to have, if anyone needs a translator, we have attorney Ken Han here, who's going to be able to assist and translate for our Korean members in the audience. And so I encourage you to do that. So thank you very much. Now let me introduce you to the panel. First, we have sitting here to my left, attorney Patricia Oliver. Okay, and I'm going to get into a little more about these people when they come up here and speak. But for right now, we have Patricia Oliver. Next to her, we have Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. We also have Dr. Anvar, who's going to be speaking to you. Next to him, we have Dr. Teggies, who's going to be speaking to you about veterinary toxicology. And then we have Matt Pacuco. Apologize, Matt. And next to Matt, we have Daniel Rabati, who's our realtor, who's going to be talking to you a little bit about relocation and displacement. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you now to Patricia and Matt. They're going to come up here, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about the South Coast Air Quality Management District hearings. Patricia is an attorney at the R. Rex Parris law firm. She co-leads the special litigation group. Patricia's focus in her career is on environmental litigation, and she also helps her clients out with government investigations. Matt is here on behalf of the Save Porter Ranch community group. So please join me in welcoming Patricia and Matt to the podium.
Can you hear me okay? Well, I'm really privileged to be able to represent the people of Porter Ranch. It is such an honor, and every day that I get to talk to all of you, I get to learn a little bit more about what it means to have moral courage. And you are showing moral courage, and you're teaching your children or representing to your neighbors what it means to have moral courage. And I encourage every one of you to continue to fight the good fight, to continue to believe and hope. And we're here to help. And on those days when it's dark and you wonder, what the heck am I doing and where is it going? Feel free to shoot me an email, because I want you to know you are always in my thoughts. I know who you are. I know your family members. I want to be there for you. So don't ever hesitate to do that. And if I don't yet know you, I always love to meet new people. So please come up and introduce yourself. I want to know you. I want to know what's going on with your family, and I want to help you. So let me start with how Matt and I got to know each other and jump into a little bit of legalisms to bore you for just a minute. I'm going to open up my PowerPoint and show you, there's not a little bit, the most important thing I want you to know is that we are, and let's go. So this is what the site looks like during the repair time. I want you to know one important thing that I want you to start with. And I want you to think about who is in charge of injection wells. It is really important to step back and ask, who issues permits for injection wells? There's one entity in California that has responsibility for issuing permits to inject underground. And you could be injecting gas, and you can be injecting water, you can inject steam. There are other kinds of injections, but this injection, a gas injection, the permit is issued by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources. So back in the old days, they called it DOG, Division of Oil and Gas. So if you ever talk to an old timer, they'll say, well, DOG did this. Well, that's the DOG they're talking about. They issue the permits, and it's really important to think about that, because when Matt retained us, Matt is with Save Porter Ranch, and I'll let Matt tell you what he did to find a lawyer who knows about injection wells.
Well, hello, I'm Matt Pacuco. Well, we interviewed a bunch of lawyers. We got all sorts of recommendations from environmental groups and from people in our our network. And we knew a little bit of the history of, recent history of like fracking and stuff, and how bad that is for everywhere, but especially next to where people live. So, and when we talked to the Rex Parris firm, the first thing that got my attention was they're the ones that were going after the polluters up in Kern County and Dogger themselves. I guess you guys filed against Dogger and Jerry Brown. Yeah, I'd heard about that case. I thought, well, that's a pretty monumental thing to go after. So I figured, and because of all their experience in this industry and with injection wells, And after speaking with several attorney firms, we couldn't get a hold of Aaron Brockovich. So we went with these guys, and we're certainly glad we did, because they are, Shea Porter Ranch's mission from the beginning was to protect the community from originally Termo, from 12 oil wells. Then we found out the gas company was a bigger problem. And so our mission is to protect against overdevelopment, like hidden creeks and stuff like that. And as far as the gas company and oil company, they were on the same mission already to go after those guys and shut them down. And they totally were on board with us single-mindedly. And I think the only attorney firm around here right now that is actually taking on the gas company to shut them down. Other firms are here doing, personal injury and stuff, and that's fine. But we picked them because they're on the same page as far as protecting the community.
So when we decided and set forth a strategic plan for what we do, the first thing we said is, okay, who issues the permits? Dogger. So who do we first go to? And the reason we're doing this is that we know the defenses. That if we just filed a lawsuit for your personal injuries, or we filed the class action lawsuit, the first thing the gas company is going to say is, we got a permit to do this. You have to go to the Dogger to challenge it. So we said, look, before we ever file anything in court, the first thing we're going to do is try to shut it down. And we're going to send a letter telling them they have to stop injecting. Now, it's kind of simple that if you have a well blowout, that you quit injecting underground and increasing the amount of stuff that has to come out, right? So no order had been issued, though. And we had looked, and we said, look, nobody's been issuing an order to stop the increased amount of contamination that comes out. So the first thing we need to do is tell the state oil and gas supervisor that they need to shut it all down. So that's what we did. We sent a letter saying, stop all of the injections until you can stop the leak. And that's all we asked for in the initial round, is until you've stopped the leak, stop injecting. Don't increase the damages to this community. So we sent a letter on December 1st asking them to stop all injections. And 9 days later, an order was issued. 9 days later, they said, stop injecting gas. Now, it's a little disappointing that it took until December 10th that an order was issued to say stop injecting gas, but it happened. And it happened because Save Porter Ranch said, let's protect the community. And we jumped in and said, that's right, let's protect the community. If Dogger's not going to do their job by stopping the injections, we're going to tell them stop injecting and making it worse. So they issued that order on December 10th, and that's what Dogger did. Now, you would think that at least temporarily settled it, because if they didn't like that, SoCalGas could have appealed that order. As far as I know, I have no record of appeal. I haven't found it. I've looked for it. But instead, they went and started the shell game, right? November 23rd, the AQMD had issued a notice of violation to a citation to SoCalGas for polluting the air. And what they ended up doing is that AQMD had inspected the facility on November 10th. Coincidentally, it was December 10th that they decided to shut the injection process down. Dogger did. And they found all these wells that weren't accessible. 16 approximately is what they say. Well, and we don't know yet why they were inaccessible. We also learned that 15 wells were leaking. We also don't know why that happened. I spoke at the AQMD hearing this last week, and I said, I'm concerned that the fact that now you guys are looking at these injection wells, you don't know what that means. You see, Dogger knows what that means. And that's a sign that SoCalGas lost control entirely of the entire field. And it's leaking everywhere. That's just a sign of what's going on. So we were like, we want proof. Now, if it's just coincidental and you show us why that's not what's happening, that's fine. But provide the evidence to the community. Porter Ranch residents and families have a right to know what's going on in that oil field. So what did they do then at that hearing? They started saying, well, we know we've been negotiating what essentially is a settlement, by the way. If you look at the order with the AQMD, it's essentially a settlement, and a long-term settlement. They were already under order to collect data. They were already under orders to cease injections. So now suddenly they go to the AQMD, and buried in that were provisions that, frankly, were horrifying. One of those provisions being that now they could start holding hearings about the injection wells and pollution from it. And then they were starting to talk about, well, now we can inject if we need the gas for the people in the community. And they said at the hearing on Wednesday, well, the CPUC decides whether we have to inject. Okay, so we start with Dogger, right? Then we go to AQMD, right? Oh, but now on Wednesday, it's CPUC who decides the injection process. So that's why I start with Dogger issues the injection well permits. That's why Save Porter Ranch, that's why we went to Dogger. They're the ones that permit these wells. So what's next? We have a three-ring circus now. We have 3 different agencies talking about how they have a role in this, and most of it's outside the public eye, except for the AQMD, which, if you look at their order, what does it say? If you read the order, it says, adoption of this order is not an unconstitutional taking of anyone's property without due process. I think it's a taking of your property. I don't think any of you had a chance to cross-examine witnesses. And who's not living in their houses right now? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, whose property is being lost? And what happens when that order is entered? Whose property just got lost? Right? All of you live in that community, and you're suddenly not living in your house, but they're going to sign an order that says there's no taking of property? Now, if they want to add there's no taking of SoCal Gas property, amen, all right? I said add that to the order. But don't say it's not a taking of property, because I have a whole bunch of people in here who are not living in their houses. So, as we're approaching this, what we had told Matt from the beginning is that we wanted to make sure that we approached it strategically. So we went to Dogger, because Dogger's job in this 3-ring circus is the permits and the safety. Okay, so we were going to go to Dogger first. The second move we would make, and we did that, second move we'd make is file a class action so that anything that could be decided on a class basis could be decided. And the third thing we do is start filing individual lawsuits. And so we keep filing individual lawsuits. Today, we also filed the first business class action lawsuit because of the business and lost income of the people in Porter Ranch. Right now, right? So we keep rolling out the cases. Now, what's going on in the courts? It's important. Everyone keeps asking me, what's going on? Is my case filed yet? We are rolling them out. What has happened in the courts, so that you know, is that there are so many people, as you can tell, the courts are overwhelmed with the number of cases. So what the courts do in that situation is they consolidate everything. And they're trying to figure out what judge will handle all of the cases and what that's going to look like. And the court will say, okay, plaintiff's lawyers, you have to play in the sandbox together, so figure out how to get along. You need to file a master complaint, probably some combination of a mass action and class action, and start figuring out how this will go through the judicial process so that, in other words, if all of you had your own lawsuit, all of you would have the right to depose every witness, right? So the court's going to say, we can't have a SoCal Gas employee, as much as they've done bad, sit for 1,000 depositions, okay? So the court's going to say, you have to play in the sandbox, plaintiff's lawyers. You have to figure out how to coordinate the schedule. Unfortunately, that part of the process takes a little longer than we'd like. We're trying to figure out where the court's going to set the cases. So the final process of what the procedure will look like, we don't yet know. That's a work in progress. In the meantime, we keep filing lawsuits, and we will know soon what that will look like. We also want you to know we're gathering a lot of evidence. So if we contact you, there are going to be days that, because of the weather, as you know, in Porter Ranch, there's a lot of wind, and it changes. And so what you smell that day might change. And so we might call you up at the last minute, and I apologize in advance. It's because our experts might say, could we film this of the plume? Or can we get an air sample or a wipe sample? I might be calling you at the last minute, and I'm sorry in advance. I just want you to know the reason we're doing that is because we're trying to figure out when the evidence is going to be present. So that will happen fairly quickly with not a lot of turnaround. So that's part of what's going on with the litigation, and that's part of what to anticipate with us trying to gather evidence. And the more you help us in that process, the faster we'll be able to move your case along. With respect to Save Porter Ranch, they're going to be, I'll let Matt take the step about where they're next and what they're going to be doing next.
All right, so we, like all of you, have learned a whole lot of stuff that we didn't want to learn about in the last few months. And it's pretty deep, and a lot of it's really shocking. We've learned everything from how horribly run and dangerous that facility is to how horribly run and dangerous our own government is. And you've all been to plenty of those meetings where we get nothing out of. So Save Porter Ranch is going to put everything we've learned about all of this together, and we're going to have our own meeting where you're going to get the other half of the story, the half that we think is really going to matter. We haven't picked a date for that yet. It'll be, pretty soon, within the next 2 weeks, I'd say. And it'll also include how you guys can help and be involved. And a lot of people are already. Save Porter Ranch has grown immensely in the number of people involved with us and how we can get the word out and how we can make things happen. Look what we've done already. We were instrumental in getting the state of emergency, instrumental in getting almost every public official to say shut it down. We, with all the phone calls and all the AQMD phone calls, with our Smell Something, Say Something campaign, we caused this AQMD hearing, for better or for worse, to happen. So that was the community all rising together. So we're going to be doing more of that, and we're going to have a meeting about that in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that one.
And as you know, AQMD is holding another hearing tomorrow. We sent a comment letter on Wednesday after the last hearing because for those of you who weren't at that hearing, you may have heard that there was a discussion of flaring the gas and capturing it. Had you heard about that? Okay, so that came up at the hearing on Wednesday, and now suddenly they can't do that safely. Now the SoCal Gas employee couldn't answer why they couldn't do it safely, which is kind of curious. But he couldn't explain what the problem was, and his lawyer didn't want to explain. So we don't have an explanation on the record of why they took that off the table. But that process keeps changing, and the reality is when you're trying to settle something without actually having the process to question all the witnesses, it ends up being just something that's kind of sliding in under the door with a lot of provisions you're not going to like. There's an AQMD hearing tomorrow. They will be taking, the last I heard, 30 minutes of public comments, 1 minute per person.
And by the way, they only want people that have not spoken yet, and it would be very valuable to bring stuff that has not been heard yet. Now, I'm sure they're pretty clear of the physical and health impacts of this whole thing. So not to belittle anybody presenting that, we need some new stuff besides that. And we're going to bring some ourselves, and we welcome you to bring something new.
It's going to be at the Hilton, right around the corner here. We will actually have some meetings with our attorneys at the same location. They're copying us, so we were there first. But they're going to be there, so you'll be able to go in during the public comment period, think strategically what you want to say. If you would take any advice from me, I'd say look at the letter that I gave them on Wednesday, see what things you want to go after, what things you're worried about, and then see what they say, because the reality is we challenged a lot of problems with it. And if it were up to me, 90% of that order would be stricken and it'd be down to the bare bones. So take a look at it, make sure you appear and make your voice heard at that hearing. it is a very good chance that we will probably have to appeal the order if they do anything as goofy as it looked the last time I saw it. So that's tomorrow. We hope that you're there at the AQMD hearing.
It's tomorrow at the Hilton Woodland Hills in the Trillium Ballroom. We're going to have a rally and a press party circus at 8 a.m. and the hearing starts at 9 a.m.
Thank you so much, Patricia and Matt. Appreciate it. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Congressman Brad Sherman. Congressman Sherman, it's a special treat that he's here. He's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He's been serving since 1997, serves the 30th Congressional District in California, the San Fernando Valley. He's a big fighter for the environment. He just recently toured the Aliso Canyon storage facility in Porter Ranch, so he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Sherman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman, and for decades I've been known as Brad Sherman from America's best named city, Sherman Oaks. But the secret is, about a year ago, Lisa and I moved up to Porter Ranch, where we own a home in the Renaissance community. And it's been interesting to bond with our neighbors over the challenge that faces us now. First, a note from my lawyer, not that we don't have enough lawyers here. I'm not here to recommend any particular legal course of action. I'm certainly not here to urge you to go with this or that law firm. Lisa and I have not taken any legal action to date. We haven't retained any particular law firm. But I want to thank the firms that are here for giving me an opportunity to talk about public policy to so many of my constituents. Now, with me here is John Alford. Where are you, John? There. And John is my advisor on environmental and transportation issues. He has been working overtime since October 23rd. And he will be passing out these cards so that we can get your email address, or just give him a business card. And it'll give us a chance to keep in touch with you, because I have a feeling that there'll be more developments on this as we go forward. John's the right guy to give information to if you have some ideas under what our public policy ought to be. Also, John is here representing our constituent service operation. If you live in my district and somebody isn't returning your phone call and you think they will return the congressman's phone call, you get your information to John and we will get somebody back on the phone. Now, although I live in Porter Ranch, I only represent about a third of the community. I do represent all of Chatsworth and Granada Hills and Northridge. I think the next speaker is Steve Knight, who represents about 2/3 of the Porter Ranch community and has the great honor of representing the location of well SS 25. I hope that you'll join me for a town hall meeting on January 26th. We're doing it as a telephone town hall in order to know what number to call in and then what PIN number to use at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. You go to my website, bradsherman.house.gov. The house is not for the house in Renaissance. The house is for the House of Representatives. bradsherman.house.gov, and you'll see how you can participate in one of our town halls, and you don't even have to leave your home. I want to talk about the past, the present, and the future. Some 115 wells were drilled over the ridge from Porter Ranch. They were there mostly to extract petroleum. They were built there in the early 1950s and thereafter, and they created a field of 3,600 acres of shale or capstone over sandstone. That sandstone once had petroleum in it. Now there's space in between the tight grains of sand, creating a field to store natural gas. The SoCal Gas Company has normally about 160 billion cubic feet of gas there. 80 billion is permanent cushion gas, and up to 80 billion is working gas that they draw upon. They built this is the largest natural gas storage facility west of the Mississippi, and they built the system for natural gas reliability for all of the LA basin around the idea that they would have one major storage facility. That is not how you build a robust system, but that is the system they built, and there is tremendous pressure on the PUC and other state agencies to let them open it up again for regular business because it plays such a role in natural gas reliability for the whole Southern California area. Another part of the history, of course, is when you bought your homes, nobody told us about that natural gas facility, let alone the details behind it. On the federal side, FASMA is the relevant federal agency. It adopted relatively good regulations with regard to the transportation of natural gas and punted to the states on the storage of natural gas. DOGGR, the relevant state agency, required annual testing, but not sophisticated ultrasonic testing designed to find anomalies in the pipes. They had testing that would allow them to know whether it was actually leaking. They tested it in late 2014, and if you have a nose, you know that it was not leaking in late 2014. The subculture among the regulators is that natural gas is only a safety concern if it might explode or burn, and so they have safety regulations for those within 100 or 300 feet. They hadn't focused on the fact that a large enough quantity of natural gas mixed with volatile organic compounds like benzene and mixed with mercaptan could be an air toxin as much as 5 miles and further away. And that is why they did not require deep subsurface safety valves. Well, SS-25 had a subsurface safety valve. It was removed in 1979, and it was not replaced. That is a continuing negligence because it could have been replaced in 79, 89, 99, 2009, or right up until October of 2015. Such safety valves were not required unless you were within 300 feet of a home or school, because the thinking was, if there's a fire, will somebody be too close? Not about the toxic effects this could have. At present, we are now experiencing the largest natural gas leak in history and demonstrating to this country that, yes, indeed, natural gas, mercaptan, and volatile organic compounds can be an air toxin. It's not just about fire and explosion. I was up there last Tuesday. I saw relief well number 1, which they hope will be able to stop this in the middle or late February. But I also saw the pad for relief well number 2 in case relief well number 1 doesn't work. Relief number 1 is within 600 feet. That means a pipe is going down 1.5 miles. It's within 600 feet of trying to hit another 8-inch pipe. So you can imagine how difficult it is to drill something down 1.5 miles and hit an 8-inch pipe. That's why they should have started relief well number 2 a long time ago. They only have the pad. There are certain things I couldn't see because of the fog, but you could hear. 1/2 mile away, you could hear the whoosh. You would think you were standing next to a major waterfall. And that is the sound of what has been apparently 5 billion cubic feet of natural gas escaping over the last 90-some days. I'm told it's the equivalent of an Empire State Building full of gas every day. There's only one thing that has been successful or partially successful so far, and that is SoCal Gas has drained the facility down to about 25 billion cubic feet of working gas. They still have the 80 billion cubic feet of cushion gas. But now SoCalGas doesn't want to withdraw as fast as they can, even though they're tout the fact that the withdrawals they've made so far have reduced the pressure, and now it's leaking out only about half as fast. Why don't they? Because they view that natural gas as an asset when we in Porter Ranch know it's a toxin. So they don't want to pull it out any quicker than they can sell it at market price. And now they want to stop pulling it out of the ground and burning it in Commerce around Los Angeles almost entirely next week. If you were at the State Assembly Committee meeting yesterday, you heard the state PUC say that they are going to tell SoCalGas to stop withdrawing gas once they're down to 15 billion cubic feet of working gas. That means that the somewhat successful efforts to reduce the pressure and reduce the leak are going to stop. Not only is that an outrage for anybody who breathes air in the North San Fernando Valley, it is also a violation of the governor's emergency order, where he has ordered that SoCalGas remove the natural gas as quickly as they can sell it, use it, or store it elsewhere. So you have the state PUC deciding to violate the governor's order because they want to make sure that gas is available to service the community later. So they're saying, stop withdrawing it, stop reducing the pressure, stop reducing the speed of the leak. I guess it's 3,000 families have been evacuated. Others are on the list. There's a bureaucracy. If people are not returning your phone calls, contact John Alford here or call my office on Monday. We got FASMA involved at the beginning, mostly as a consultant. We got the EPA involved. They said they didn't have jurisdiction. We did the legal research. We proved to them they had a legal obligation to get involved, but they're involved mostly in an advisory capacity at this point. I wrote the governor last week that he needed to write a letter to the Small Business Administration. He did. The SBA is now in the process of identifying businesses that need help. Though, as long as we have a sufficient number, I think it's only 5, clearly identified, they will make available loans as good as 4% unsecured, 30-year for working capital. That's important not only for the commercial businesses that we see on Rinaldi, but that's important for the home businesses that some of you have, and that's important for those who are in the landlord or rental business who have to make mortgage payments, but imagine trying to secure a tenant for a home in Renaissance right now. Let's talk about the future. The facility is closed down now. They are withdrawing gas as you would from any closed down facility, but they're not allowed to put any new gas in. So the question is whether they should be allowed to open it back up. As a community, we'd prefer that never happen. If you look at the way the natural gas infrastructure has been built for the whole city and region of Los Angeles, you see there's tremendous pressure to use Aliso Canyon, at least for years until they develop something else. But the burden of proof is on SoCalGas to prove that this facility is safe. And just because one well is plugged, that leaves 114 others. 18 of them are vintage wells older than me, and I'm older than most of you. Clearly, we need subsurface safety valves and the modern ones with the positive pressure all the way down at the bedrock or the capstone. Clearly, we need ultrasonic testing. None of this is yet required. SoCalGas isn't in the process of doing it now in any accelerated fashion. You would think that every redneck who, or I forget what the term is, I don't think it's redneck, every oil field worker, what? Roughneck. Good. Thank you. Who just lost their job in North Dakota because you can't drill for oil when it's selling for $26 a barrel, would be headed to Porter Ranch right now to to check out all 114 wells. But no, there is not an accelerated system. They are checking out a few of the wells up there. As I may have mentioned, 90% of the storage of natural gas for the LA Basin is in one facility. Now, we also have to worry about electric reliability because we need natural gas to generate electricity. I have urged the PUC to explore ways to import electricity if we can't generate it here in the Los Angeles Basin. They're going to need a new electric approach until Aliso Canyon goes back online, and if it can't be safe, it's never going back online. We need health testing for residents, and it needs to be long-term. A lot of the health problems are caused by not the methane, but the mercaptan, and I am working with federal agencies to develop a grant program so that we do research to come up with an alternative to mercaptan that gives you that safety smell but doesn't cause the health problems that we have discovered from long-term exposure to mercaptan. One of the issues for the future, and I'm now talking, I've said past, present, future, I'm not talking about the future, is whether or not the costs of all this are going to be passed through to ratepayers, to consumers, or whether they're going to be coming from the shareholders of SoCal Gas. And if you were at the hearing yesterday, you'd be a little worried because the Public Utilities Commission, which is there to protect consumers, testified that ratepayers should not pay inappropriately and that no unreasonable cost should find its way into consumer bills. Chairman Gatto, used to work for me, now chair of the relevant assembly committee, declared right there that he was going to work in the legislature to say, as I said, not one penny of the reasonable or unreasonable cost of capping the well or of compensating the community should be passed through to consumers. And the biggest single cost that I think we're going to see is to be compensated for the lost value in homes. The way I've seen economists analyze this is they look on October 22nd, the day before the leak, and they see how well were Porter Ranch homes doing compared to Woodland Hills or Santa Clarita or similar communities, not exactly the same, that are not affected by the leak, as far as I know. And maybe a Porter Ranch home of the same size is 85%, it costs 85% as much of one in Woodland Hills, maybe 120% of Santa Clarita. You look at that ratio, and then you see where are we a year after the leak, and you see whether there's been a continuing, persistent, negative effect on the willingness of people to pay money for the homes that we've invested all of our savings in. And that, I think, will be the single biggest expense item that should not be passed through to ratepayers. So I know I've gone a little longer than you may have put me on the schedule for here. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow at the AQMD hearing, where the point I'll be making is that the governor has ordered in his emergency proclamation that you withdraw gas as quickly as you can and you bring down the pressure, because that's the only thing reducing this leak now. And the PUC is ordering that they stop withdrawing gas sometime next week. I hope that you'll drop me a line at brad.sherman at mail.house.gov, and I hope that you'll join us for the town hall on January 26th. You can get the details for that on the webpage, bradsherman.house.gov. Folks, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to address my constituents here.
Thank you so much, Congressman Sherman. Ladies and gentlemen, next, I'd like to introduce you to Congressman Steve Knight. Congressman Knight is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, represents the 25th Congressional District, California, Simi Valley, Santa Clarita, and Antelope Valley. He's a native of Antelope Valley himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Knight.
Good evening. I thought since you've seen Congressman Sherman and myself at several of these, we were at the UNC last night, we've been at the AQMD, we've been at several other hearings. I thought I'd give you a little bit of new information of what we heard last night. And I know several of you were at the UNC hearing last night with Chairman Gatto, but I wanted to bring forward some of the information that came out last night and how we're going to be addressing some of these issues in the future. So just some of the information that came from either residents and their concerns or came from the county of public, or the county public health department, or came from the CPUC. And some of these issues I think are very important to know so that as we move forward and make sure that this doesn't happen in the future, we're working on the things that we should be using. So I'll give you a couple of the little bullets here that I took last night, and bear with me, these are bullets, but the public made it very clear, and I think everyone's made it clear, that no well can be made safe, that can't be made safe must be killed. If we do not check the well, if we do not make sure that it's not leaking and gone through its process, then obviously that well cannot be used. Safe distance for residents. We should be looking at this 300 mark. Alternative agents that can be used. Whether we have determined that these are unhealthy or healthy or not unhealthy, we should be looking at alternatives, because I think that anyone who breathes something into their lungs that is not clean air, I think we would all agree has some possibilities. Upgrading and modernizing needs to be done to the wells and to the site. Public disclosure, I thought that one was one that was talked about quite a bit last night in many of these. Public disclosure, if you're buying or selling a house in the area. Official moratorium on new wells. Leaks should be stated to local officials as soon as they happen. It shouldn't be a leak, and then maybe 2 or 3 days later, local officials know, because we do have a website, we do have Facebook, we do have the ability to reach out to 10 or 100,000 people very quickly. Keep us informed. The major issue that happened last night is there's not enough information. We're not being informed. There's not enough on the sites. That was one of the big issues. So I'm going to go into some of the things that we've done and some of the issues. And the last one that I heard last night, samples have been taken to determine short and long-term effects, again through the Department of Public Health at the county level. We have been in close conversation with the county, and we will get those samples, that data. We will put it up on our website as soon as they give it to us so that you can see that. I'm getting there. So, from the very beginning, my priorities all along have been the same: to ensure that the situation is resolved as quickly and effectively as possible, and to get the people of Porter Ranch the help that they need. That means a few things to me. So, first and foremost, any resident who is experiencing difficulties with relocation, reimbursement, air filters, any of those issues, can call me personally. Some of you in the audience have already called me personally. And to date, not one person who has called me on my personal cell phone we have not taken care of. And it's interesting that when a congressman calls, you get bumped up. So use that. I'm giving it to you right now. I give it to every group that I speak to except for last night. And I forgot, I'm sorry. But it is 661, and I'll give it to you at the end too, 450-7422. Lisa Moulton is my district director. She's in the back. Stand up, Lisa. She's right over there. I'll give it to you about 3 more times. Lisa will have it. Lisa will have cards. My number is 661-450-7422. You can find it on my website. KABC put it on the news the other day. You can find it on just about anything. I do have a lot of minutes. You can also call my district office at 255-5630, 255-5630. That is my Santa Clarita office, and we can take care of you. We've received at least 2 to 10 calls on my personal cell phone every day since, I'm going to say about November 15th, and we've worked these to the resolve. It's my job as your representative to provide you with the most up-to-date information, and that's exactly what we've done. If you go to my website, that's night.house.gov, night, K-N-I-G-H-T, .house.gov, you will see a complete timeline of what we've done, what information we've either gotten from the gas company or from residents, or what I have done on touring. You will see a complete timeline there. We have testified at numerous hearings. We will go to every hearing. If there is something that is called, we will be there, either me personally or my staff will be there. And lastly, I'd like to put out that I am the representative for not just Aliso Canyon, but for Honorancho. And for anyone who knows where Honorancho is, that's in Santa Clarita Valley. That is another gas facility. It holds about 25% of what Aliso Canyon holds, but it is another large gas facility in Santa Clarita Valley. I have toured that twice in the last 6 months and asked them about certain issues that are happening at Aliso Canyon and what issues might be happening at Honorancho. I have toured Aliso Canyon on the 9th of January. I've been up to Aliso about 20 times. But on the 9th was the first time since the leak, and I did stand next to the relief well and watch what they're doing. My job is not to put out misinformation, and my job is not to say things that are outlandish. Hopefully the paper will pick up something and I'll be in the newspaper. My job is to actually help the residents get through bad problems and not make the problem worse, and that's what you will get from my office. So please, if you have an issue, you can call me directly, you can call Lisa, you can call my office, you can email me on that night.house.gov, you could go through that. Texting me is the best way, 661-450-7422, 450-7422, and if my phone doesn't light up in the next hour, then ask somebody, and they'll give it to you. Please, we are here to help, and we want to help. I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Congressman Knight. We really appreciate you joining us this evening. Our next speaker is a prominent environmental lawyer and activist, widely read author and speaker. He studied at Harvard, the London School of Economics, University of Virginia Law School. He's a partner with the law firm of Kennedy and Madonna, and Time magazine has named him one of our heroes of the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
Thank you, Robert. Please excuse my voice, and I want to start by introducing again Ken Hahn and his wife Karen. And if you could just stand and wave to people. And Ken is part of our legal team. He's a local resident, and he speaks Korean as well as English, and he's been a terrific partner for us. I want to say one thing for starters, which is something about one of my other partners, Patricia Oliver, who you heard from a little bit earlier. And she told you a story, a detail that I want to make sure sunk in, because she discovered this. Patricia discovered this. She's been a font of information for us, going through every document, exploring every lead, and dug up more information than any of the other attorneys who've been involved in this case. One of the things she found is that the air quality Management District, the Southern California Air Quality Management District, has brought a case against Southern California Gas for this leak. So now Southern California Gas is trying to settle that case with the district. And they have proposed a settlement. And the district was looking upon this settlement as if it was something that they were probably going to do. The settlement contains no penalties for the company. But worst of all, it contains all of these little averments and languages that are designed to give permanent immunity to the company. And that's when Patricia Oliver said to you that one of the things, the findings that they're trying to get the Air Quality Management District to agree to is a finding that no taking of property has occurred. So that would be in the order. And of course, the gas company would then argue in a subsequent court case that the relevant regulatory agency has found that none of you suffered any injury because no taking of property has occurred. Now, if we didn't catch that, that almost certainly would have gone into that order. And that's why it's important that we have attorneys who are watching this and are looking over their shoulder and looking at all of the kind of shenanigans and mischief that this company is up to. And we know, and I'm not going to go into it tonight, but we have a whole list of mischief that they've been up to. I mean, you know a lot of it. Not providing, and I'll just tell you, Robert gave me a very generous introduction. I've been doing environmental law for 33 years. I teach environmental litigation, which I've done for 30 years. I've been involved in over 500 environmental lawsuits. I argued the biggest lawsuit, a 6.5-week jury trial in West Virginia 3 years ago that got the largest judgment in the history of the state. And I've been involved in all the controversies. I'm involved, one of the attorneys in the BP case. I've been suing the carbon industry and specifically the oil and gas industry for 33 years. My first suit ever was against Exxon. My fifth suit was against Mobil. This was before the two companies merged. And I've been suing them ever since, and mainly successfully. And I've seen how they operate, and I've seen the control that they exercise over the regulatory agencies and over our elected officials. In all of those years of litigation, I've seldom seen a case where there was this kind of immediate impact on public health. You see a lot of cases where there's exposure to benzene or there's exposure to some chemical, and maybe years later you want to do medical monitoring because you know that you've put people at risk through latent through the latent development of tumors or whatever. You don't see cases like this where you see whole communities where children, where dozens or even more, hundreds of children have nosebleeds, have migraine headaches, have respiratory problems, or have vomiting, have lethargy, have asthma attacks, where animals are dying. One of my best friends lives in Chatsworth, and he's on my board at the Waterkeeper Alliance. His dog went into convulsions, a corgi, and died. He has two cats who got sick because they're all at ground level, and a lot of this stuff, these gases are dense during certain parts of the day, and the animals that live down there are affected. And they have a child who is an NBA prospect, and he had to stop playing basketball. They had to close down a business here, which was a very successful business, and they had to move their employees elsewhere because they wanted to get them out of danger, and the employees were feeling ill. Every time I've made a visit to this site with lawyers from outside, everybody has gotten sick. I'm the only one who didn't get sick. I can eat like bad oysters and not get sick. The people who are with me came away with migraine headaches and with stomach aches, with lung damage. The truth is, we can't tell you what these chemicals are doing to you. And Dogger can't tell you that, and Governor Brown can't tell you that, and Southern California Gas can't tell you that, and the Public Utility Commission can't tell you that, because the science hasn't been done. But when you see kids with nosebleeds, and when you see people getting, and my friends moved out of Chatsworth, and what they told me was it was not till they moved out that they realized how bad things were. Because you get up and, they were telling me that they were walking around with kind of brain fogs. But, brain fog happens, right? And you don't know what caused you brain fog. Maybe you didn't sleep well, so you don't really attribute it to the gas. And they had lethargy. They had no energy. They had dizziness and these kind of things, but they didn't know it was the gas. When they called the gas company and they said, "We smell gas, we think we have a gas leak," the gas company, Southern California Gas, told them, "Don't worry about it." They've asked for, these people are well enough off that they were able to find another house on their own. They wanted to get air purifiers for their home here for when they come back and they left the animals here. The gas company told them that there was a 4-week order, a 4-week waiting list to get air purifiers. And that if they went down to Best Buy and bought it for themselves, that the gas company was not going to pay for it. So I'm going to say it's a criminal enterprise, but first I'm going to say it is a very bad corporate citizen. This is a neighbor who didn't tell anybody what they were up to, who took all of these risks, who made a calculated risk when they removed that safety valve. They made a calculated risk. And what was the risk? What was the calculation? It was a calculation that whatever gas they lost, the risk was that it was more expensive to fix that safety valve, and the risk that they were going to lose their commodity. But in that calculation, they were not including you. They were not including your pets, your children, your home values. They made a calculation based upon their own costs of doing business. And that is a story that we need to tell to a jury. And there's a bigger story that we need to tell to a jury too, because this was a company, and many of you remember what happened to the Pinto, right? The Ford Pinto. You guys remember that. If you're as old as me, you remember that. Ford had a Pinto, and they realized that they had put a gas tank, there was a defective design. They put a gas tank in the back of that Pinto that if it were hit in a certain way, the gas tank would blow through the floor of the Pinto and would release the gas in the cabin of the car and would burn everybody to death. And it had to be just a small hit. But they had a memo that said, you know what, there's going to be about 310 people who die from this, and it costs $11 per car. We have 5.5 million cars. It's $11 per car to fix the problem. It's cheaper for us to pay the death judgments for these people who are going to burn to death. So they made that calculation. And companies make those calculations all the time. It didn't stop when they got busted. You saw what Volkswagen did this year. And they said, we're going to disable the emissions on every diesel car that we produce. And we're going to lie. And because we think that the chance of getting caught and what we're going to have to pay when we do get caught is less than the money we'll make from doing that crime. So you see, you know what's happening in Flint, Michigan right now, right? And you know the parallels. It's a public utility that was poisoning people, that had captured the agencies that were supposed to protect the public from pollution, that had corrupted the governor of the state. And when they found out about it, it took them months and months and months before they did anything about it. And this happens, in my experience, it happens all the time. Americans are shocked, and most of you are shocked to see this happening in your community. That's what happens. These government, and particularly with the oil industry, they are masters at capturing the government process. Now, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this, because I know you guys all know this, but that, that's a schematic of the well. And of course, that well is the same age I am. It's 63 years old, 62 years old. I was born in 1954. The same year they put that in. And the last time I talked to her, I said, I can tell you from being 62 years old that a lot of stuff falls apart. and this is a 7-inch pipe, right? And that pipe's made of metal. And everybody knows it's going to rust, and everybody knows the corrosion is increased by when you're pumping gas through that well. That well was built to suck oil out of the ground, and so it wasn't designed as a gas injection well. If it had been designed as a gas injection well, they would have had to put a legal one. They would have had to put cement casing all the way down, and they didn't do that. There's no cement casing for most of that well. That well goes down more than a mile, 8,050 feet. And you see the reservoir, and then there's a tube going up from the reservoir. Then you see the base, what they call the foot of the casing. Well, at that foot, there was a safety valve. And that safety valve had the capacity to sense automatically if there was a drop in pressure in the tube above it. If there was a drop in pressure, it meant that the well had ruptured and the gas was escaping, and it would immediately clamp a cover on that reservoir so nothing could get out. And we wouldn't have a problem. Legally, they had to have that there. Now, it came out in 1976, the state inspected it, and 3 years later, that thing broke. And they found that it was expensive for them to repair because one of the parts were no longer made. So they said, rather than change it, we'll just take it out and we won't tell anybody. Not only did they not tell anybody, but they affirmatively lied about it. And if you look at this, you'll see this is a 2014 report. And that little red square at the bottom of the report shows a picture that's a schematic of the well, and it shows a picture. This is a report that they legally had to file with Dogger. And it shows them telling Dogger that indeed there is a working, functioning safety valve at the foot of that well. So they filed that in 2014. But guess what? They filed it in 2013 too, and 2012 and 2011. For 39 years, every year they had to tell a lie. They had to tell a lie to the utility. That is beyond negligence. This is, in my view, criminal behavior. They endangered. Just like Ford with the Pinto, they were trying to save a buck. Just like what happened in Flint, Michigan. They were trying to save a buck by taking water from the Flint River, which had 10 times the amount of lead as the Detroit River, and they saved $120 a day not putting the anti-corrosive chemical into the pipe that would have prevented all the poisoning of all those 9,000 children, right, with lead poisoning that will permanently lose their IQ points, many IQ points for the rest of their lives. So they did the same thing here. They said, we can save a buck, and we're not going to think about what the consequences are. And, that's what we do. We go after people who make these kind of calculations. Let's see the next one. Now, the Dogger and the Southern California Gas is doing tests, air tests, they say. They're only doing air tests for certain parameters. They're measuring the methane, and now they're measuring the benzene because we made them do it. Look what's showing up. There's a mist coming out of the the busted well, and it's showing up on homes. Let's go through these. And these little spots that you're seeing on your cars and your houses and your walls, those are that is a hydrocarbon. We don't know what's in it. We can guess, because we know what is usually in hydrocarbon. There's benzene, which is carcinogenic. There's toluene, which is mutagenic and teratogenic. There's xylene. There's probably polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are carcinogenic. There may be hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, which can be at some levels neurotoxic. This is ending up on your houses. It's invisible until it ends up on that white wall. But it's in the air all the time, and you're breathing it. And that's what your lung looks like, and your children's lungs. Because all of them are breathing this, and it's invisible. But the fact that it's ending up on these walls is showing you that it is also ending up in your lungs. And we have no idea what is inside that stuff. But we do know this, that particles of hydrocarbon and globules of hydrocarbon are much more dangerous kind of exposure than just breathing gases. It stays in you, it creates inflammation, and it creates vectors for it getting in and remaining in your body. And nobody's measuring this. We found this because you talked to us. We saw it on your swimming pools. You showed it to us. We saw it on your white cars. We saw it on your walls, in your homes, outside of your homes. Dogger's not looking for this. The PSC isn't looking for this. Not even the LA County Department of Health is looking for this. And Southern California Gas is not looking for this. We need to go. We're in the process right now of testing those ourselves. We shouldn't have to do that. This should be something that Southern California Gas, as a responsible corporation, comes to you and say, we found this, we're really sorry, we're going to do something about it, we don't know what it does to people, so we're going to move you all out immediately because we're concerned about what it might do to you, which they ought to be. They didn't do that. We had to do this. We had to find these because you told us about them. Let's see the next. Okay. This is the methane data. This is coming from Southern California Gas. We don't know how many testing stations they have. This kind of illustrates what Congressman Sherman was talking about, which is there has been, those are the maximum levels that they're finding every day. So, and the maximum levels are very, very high, by the way. And there's been a decline, and that makes sense if, according to what Congressman Sherman said, they're draining down the reservoir, so there's less pressure, so there's less methane. But let me go back to that. Because I've had a lot of experience with testing, with air testing particularly, and water testing. And we have a saying in my racket that statistics don't lie, but statisticians do. And I can say the same thing about test takers. If you want to take a test and find nothing, there's lots of ways you can do that. Because these chemicals are not homogeneous in the air. They're not all around you at the same concentrations all the time. Somebody who knows what they're doing can put the air testing machine, it moves in plumes, and it moves in slugs, and it hides in little depressions and basements and river valleys and gullies and stays there during certain times of the day. And we don't know. These are grab samples. We need continuous testing from hundreds of sites before anybody moves back in this area, and we need to move the people out. One thing I happen to know about, and I can't make any claim about it now, but I know this, that methane, when it's exposed to sunlight, can produce as a byproduct formaldehyde. And formaldehyde is a carcinogen. We don't know how much it produces. We don't know if that's a danger. Southern California Gas knows that too. because this is an issue all over the country with gas compressors. People who work around gas compressors or in the gas fields are very aware of the fact that it transforms when it's subjected to sunlight to formaldehyde. So Southern California Gas knows that, and they ought to be straight about it. They ought to be telling us, okay, here's one of the risks that we need to be aware of. But they're not doing that. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this, which we can provide you all, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but these are the levels that we're seeing, high levels that we're seeing in various communities. And you see Highlands and Porter Ranch have by far the highest levels of methane. And then the outlying communities, and we don't know how far out it goes. It may, the congressman said 5 miles. There's estimates that it may go as far as 10 miles in surrounding communities. So we really don't know. But if you look at those, the farther from the well you get, the lower numbers tend to go, and it concentrates in certain communities. But every one of those communities has much higher levels than are permitted, sometimes hundreds of times the levels that are permitted under state law. And this is benzene. As you see, it has the same trajectory. And benzene, of course, is a carcinogen. And all of these levels are around almost all of those levels are around the 1 part per billion level that is the maximum exposure level. Some of them are much higher than that. And these are the locations, and again, Highlands and Porter Ranch have the worst exposures. These are the gas wells, the active ones, the inactive ones have a little white on them. Let's go. And this is one of the things that we're doing, is that we're doing an overlay. We're taking, and this is just a small part of it, we're taking the symptoms that we see people expressing and showing different things, whether it's pregnancy complications. We found a woman who had pregnancy complications in that part of the well field, and we learned that several of her neighbors had the same thing. A cat dies, and we learned that many other neighbors had their cats die too. So we're doing an overlay, and we're looking at the places that are most impacted, where they're the highest concentrations. And so if you have symptoms to report, tell us so that we can put it on the map. It's anonymous, but it helps other people, and it helps us identify symptoms that people might be having. That DOGR is the regulatory agency that is in charge, and in July 2011, EPA told DOGR that it had been illegally issuing permits in violation of the Safe Drinking Water Act. There's a lot of things the Safe Drinking Water Act requires. It requires extensive geological surveys, and it also requires casing studies. And that's what EPA wanted them to do. Now let's see the next one. So at that time, there was and it's not up here, but there was a lawsuit in Inglewood that was settled, and it was a huge settlement that the oil company had to pay. Why? Because they had defective casings. They didn't comply with the casing protocols. So the oil industry and gas industry panicked, and they called up Governor Brown. Gray Davis, who is Occidental Oil Company's attorney, called Governor Brown and said, you have 2 troublemakers who are in the Department of Conservation. One of them is the oil and gas supervisor, Elena Miller. This was an honest government official, an honest public servant. And her boss, Derek Chernow, who was the acting director of the Department of Conservation. Gray Davis told Governor Brown, you need to get rid of these people because they're requiring casing surveys. The oil industry didn't want them anymore because those surveys were showing that they were operating illegally and they were having to pay money and penalties. They wanted to get rid of them. So on October 28, 2011, Brown's office called those two public servants, honest public servants, and said, here is an ultimatum. Either you issue the permits without the casing surveys or we fire you. And on November 3rd, they refused, and Brown fired both of them. In January 2012, Brown publicly boasted that he said that the firing of those two officials has allowed a lot more oil production to start to take place in the state, particularly in Kern County. And he said defiantly, there's going to be trouble, there's going to be indictments, there will be deaths, but we will keep going. That was his devotion to the oil industry. Now, I have to tell you, I've been a long-time admirer of Governor Brown. He ran against my uncle for president in 1980, and I always loved going to hear him speak and mingling with his workers, because he was the greatest environmental politician in this country. And he had this long history, but environmentalists have been complaining for many years now that he has a blind spot when it comes to the oil industry. And how do you get that blind spot? Well, wherever you see large-scale environmental injury of the kind that we see here, you're also going to see a subversion of democracy. You're going to see the corruption of politicians at the highest level. You're going to see the capture of the agencies that are supposed to protect Americans from pollution. You're going to see the disappearance of transparency. And you're going to see the loss of local control. And nobody tells you what's happening. It's all done behind closed doors. And how do they do it? There's a number of ways. It's called captive agency phenomena. And Dogger is the poster child for that phenomena. It's the way that the industry turns the agency that's supposed to protect the public from that industry, and that agency gets turned into a sock puppet for the industry it's supposed to regulate. There's many ways. There's a revolving door, and you can see that, and we have that well documented, that between Dogger and Southern California Gas, the same attorneys, the same officials are running both of them, go back and forth. But also, so on January 9th, following those firings, Tim Kustik, who now replaced Chernow, issues a permit to frack a well in an almond orchard, and it's violating the law because there's no environmental review. But he does that. 4 days later, Occidental contributes its first $250,000 to the Brown proposition increase called Prop 30, and altogether the oil industry gave almost $2 million to that proposition. And that's one of the ways that they corrupt our politicians. They give money. In August 2012, Occidental wanted another permit, illegal permit, to frack a well in an almond orchard. It was a very limited illegal environmental review. The new director of California DEC, Mark Nigadome, calls the Kern County planning director about the secret review, which they had illegally gotten rid of. And then he wrote an email thanking her and welcoming her in as an unindicted co-conspirator. So they knew they were breaking the law. They were proud of breaking the law. And they were proud of what they were doing for the oil industry rather than the people that they're supposed to be protecting. The Kern County official replied, "We share the same goal." That's a quote. She did not comment or object to the fracking in the oil orchard. Occidental then contributed another $250,000 to the Brown proposition. The total contributed was, actually that says 1.2, but it's over $2 million. And Governor Brown has accepted, since 2006, personally accepted for his campaigns, not his proposition, an extraordinary $2,104,570. So you wonder why the government seems to be in cahoots with the oil company rather than in cahoots with the people here whose lives are being disrupted. How many of you want to be in this room tonight listening to this? Right, none of you. You want to be with your kids. You want to be home. No, not one of you should be here. You should be so furious about being in this room and having to listen to all this and learn stuff that is pushing valuable information out of your heads. You have to be here now because you are under assault by this company and by this corruption. It's not just a company, it is a systemic, institutional, political corruption that has done this to you, to your families, to your homes, to the things that you value. And you need to understand that. And remember, I told you that part of the subversion of democracy was getting rid of transparency. Well, the farmers in Kern County said, we want to get the government documents that show how this decision was made to start putting fracking wells in our almond orchards. The AG's office, which has also been accepting money from the oil industry, blocked the depositions and now says that Brown's order to approve injection wells is a privileged communication that the public shouldn't know about. Does that sound like democracy? I don't think so. Let's do the next one. Okay, and you know, Kathleen Brown, the governor's sister, received a salary of $188,000 last year, $267,000 the year before from Sempra, which is the company that owns Southern California Gas. She owns $400,000 worth of Sempra stock that will be dramatically impacted if they have to pay you the value of your homes. And Kathleen Brown is also a partner in the law firm that represents the California Independent Petroleum Association, which contributed to Brown's and to his propositions and to him personally. And SEPA worked with Occidental to get Brown to approve the injection well permits in violation of the law. It stinks. It stinks to high heaven. It's not just the mercaptan that stink. This whole thing stinks. This is what in New York and in Louisiana and West Virginia we call pay to play. Pay to play. That's what's happening here. They're the ones who play. You're the ones who pay. Keep going. This is self-evident. Okay, so, you know, I've been fighting these kind of battles my entire professional life, and I can tell you something. What you will hear, and what you hear kind of alluded to by the congressman, is that, you know, all of the powers that be are thinking not how can we protect you, but how can we protect the shareholders, and how can we make sure that the gas stays in the ground and keeps pumping. That's what they're thinking of. That's what the people who run things are thinking of. We're going to stop them. But that's what they want to do. Oh, and what you will hear from Southern California Gas and from Sempra and from Kathleen Brown and from Jerry Brown is you're going to hear that, you know, the thing that we always hear from the oil tycoons and the oil barons and their indentured servants in Sacramento is that we have to choose between economic prosperity on the one hand and environmental protection on the other. And that is a false choice. In 100% of the situations, good environmental policy is identical to good economic policy if we want to measure our economy. And this is how we ought to be measuring it, based upon how it produces jobs and the dignity of jobs over the generations, how it preserves the value of our communities, the health of our children, the value of our properties, the welfare and prosperity of our communities. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is to follow what Southern California Gas says, which is that we're going to treat the San Fernando Valley and Porter Ranch and the surrounding communities as if they were a business in liquidation. Convert our natural resources to cash and our people, you know, who are just production units, and our properties to cash as quickly as possible, have a few years of pollution-based prosperity. And they can do that and generate an instantaneous cash flow for 31 years while they were lying to everybody. And they can make a few people, millionaires by impoverishing the rest of us. Our children and you and your communities are going to pay for their joyride. And you're paying for it now through denuded environment and having to come to meetings like this on nights like this when you should be home with your family, and with moving and diminished property values and poor health and the anxiety that your children may get a tumor 20 years from now, and all of those costs they're imposing on you. They're externalizing the cost of producing gas. And they're saying, I loved what the congressman said, but I didn't like the fact that he said, we're going to have federal money to study an alternative to mercaptans. Why are we paying for them? This is the richest industry on the history of the globe. If they can't pay for their own stuff, then let solar and wind have it. Because that's they're not asking for those subsidies. So anyway, I've gone over my time, but I just want to tell you that, I am sorry you have to be here tonight. I shouldn't be here tonight. I should be home with my family. But I am going to do everything in my power and use every legal talent and gift that I have to get in front of a jury and get you the biggest settlement that you can possibly get for all of for the things that they're not going to want to compensate you for. The the intangible stuff, not just your property values, like the congressman said, to get you so that you get reimbursed for having to come out here tonight and sit here and look at that. There's 1,000 or more people in this room. If you add up, if you're even making $10 an hour, this is a huge amount of money. And some of you are attorneys and are making huge amounts of money. So, you shouldn't have to do this. And all of these costs, they are externalizing their costs and trying to do all their old schemes to make you pay the cost of them bringing their product to market. And that includes the cost of cleaning up after yourself, which was a lesson that we were all supposed to have learned in kindergarten. And they didn't learn it when they were in kindergarten, but we're going to teach them that lesson now. And we want to help you, we want to stand by your side, and we will see you on the barricades.
You know what? We got to save questions to the end. I'm very sorry. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night. I apologize, sir. Go ahead. One question. Let's do it.
Mr. Kennedy, you just said that these corporations are doing illegal things, criminal things, and they should be punished for it. Corporation is books. The people who made that decision not to put the wall, they should be prosecuted, and they should be held responsible. Not only the corporation, but the people who do it. In America, we don't do it. In America, what we do, money buys all the politicians, so all the politicians are free, and they take bribes from these corporations, and they ruin the lives of innocent Americans.
Okay, we want to put you on the witness stand, first witness.
Yeah. First witness.
Thank you very much.
People who made these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We're going to keep moving along. I next want to introduce you to our first doctor of the evening, Dr. John Tegzies. Dr. Tegzies is the director of Western University Health Sciences in Pomona. He is a veterinarian toxicologist. He is one of the only few board-certified veterinary toxicologists in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Tegzies.
So how many of you in the room own animals? Looks like the vast majority. And I'm going to talk to you for a few moments. I'm going to actually come around this way so I can see you better. But I'm going to talk to you about why you should all be concerned about animal health and how we can work together to try to figure out what we can expect in both you and your animals. So I am a veterinarian, and my specialty is in veterinary toxicology. I've spent the majority of my career studying how poisons affect animals. One Health is a term that analyzes the interactions and the relationships among humans, animals, and the environment. And I spent a lot of my time looking at animal health and helping to predict how some toxins and poisons will ultimately affect the environment and people as well. And so I think it's really important that we look at your animals and that we come up with some strategies to try to prevent some of the health effects. So the animals that we see, and we just heard from our other speakers, that we don't know all the long-term chronic effects that this gas leak is going to have on either you or your animals. There isn't readily available information that points to, well, at this level, we can experience these things in this time frame. If we pay attention to the health of the animals, we'll quickly see that animals have a much shorter lifespan than we do. So if we are anticipating chronic effects in humans in 30 years from now or 20 years from now, that's going to be a year or two in your dog or cat. And so it's really important that we keep a close eye in order to help predict what maybe we can do to help your health as we move forward. There are lots of components to the toxic gas leak. You know that already. We've heard a lot about that. Some have short-term effects, some long-term, and that's what we need to kind of figure out together. We know that methane and its odorants are causing a lot of the signs that you're all seeing with bloody noses. The same exact thing is happening to your animals. The more dangerous thing, in my opinion, are the gases that are heavier than air. Methane is relatively light, it dissipates, but hydrogen sulfide and benzene are very heavy. They tend to settle on the ground in low places, exactly where dogs and cats spend most of their time. And how do dogs and cats explore their environment? Through their noses and their mouths. So anything that's down there, they're going to inhale deeply, and they're probably going to eat. So we need to be very conscious and aware of some of the things that we could expect from them. We know that at high concentrations, some of the symptoms that people experience, like headaches and memory loss, come out in different ways in dogs and cats. They can't tell us when they're hurting. So look for signs of that your pet just doesn't want to be around you, that they hide off in other locations. That sometimes means that your pet's in pain. Likewise, if they don't want to eat, I know my own dogs, they revolve around their food bowl. They want to eat all the time. So any change in appetite is significant, and you should really pay attention to that. Benzene is the other toxic gas that we've talked a lot about or you've heard a lot about. That's the one that I find most worrisome for the long-term chronic effects because we know it's carcinogenic. And as I said a moment ago, we can really look at our animals to try to see what we can do, what we can find out about them in order to predict maybe some of the things we can do for people as well. So again, just to reiterate some of the things that I said to you a moment ago, changes in appetite, lethargy, all the same things that you've been hearing about tonight, sleepiness, red eyes, bloody noses, mouth irritation, all important to see. So what I keep getting asked is what should we do? What should you talk to your veterinarian about? What kinds of things should we be watching for? And I'm going to talk about those. So the health risks are lung disease, suppressed immune systems, infections, neurological effects, cancers, and poor reproductive health. Now, most of our animals are spayed or neutered, and that's a really good thing, but some of you probably have animals that are breeding animals. Maybe some of you have horses as well, where the reproductive health is really important to you. That's one of the things that will also be impacted by the toxic gases, and we need to keep an eye on. So what I'm recommending and what you should say to your veterinarian, I'm recommending that your pets be examined every 6 months. And the things that I would like them to watch for are changes in body weight, and most specifically the size of their lymph nodes. So in order to assess the lymph nodes and the effect on their immune systems, there are certain things that they can do. They can take a chest x-ray every 6 months. What that will do is help to evaluate the airways, but more importantly, what I'm really trying to look for are changes in the size of lymph nodes that are inside of the chest. They should also, when they're doing physical exams, really be examining the lymph nodes throughout the body and looking for changes in size. If they examine them every 6 months, we'll get a nice, be able to track them over a period of time. Likewise, some blood tests and to evaluate their organ function, but even more importantly, and this is something that isn't typically done on a vet visit, but you should ask them to do a blood smear. And that allows them to look at the morphology of the white blood cells and to see if there are any changes from the toxins themselves. I truly, sincerely hope that none of your animals die through this. But if they do die, we need to collect important information from them. What I suggest is that you submit the entire carcass to a veterinarian so that it can be evaluated. What we call a necropsy in veterinary medicine is the same thing as an autopsy. And I apologize that I just used the word carcass. That was insensitive of me. But you do need to submit the entire body. What we normally would like is for that to be submitted very, very quickly so it can be evaluated. But if you're not able to do that, it's important that you wrap the body in aluminum foil and then put it in plastic. And I'm sorry that I'm saying these things, but I think it's really important for us to get information. The reason for that is that plastics contain petroleum products. And we don't want anything from plastic to leach it, onto the body that would interfere with any toxicological analyses that we would perform. So wrapping in tin foil is a good thing to do. We've learned a lot about this through some of the from some of the oil leaks in Alaska and in the South, and how to best make sure that we're getting the right samples. So be proactive. Make sure that you're feeding your animals and giving them water inside. You shouldn't be leaving water bowls or food bowls outside in the air. Make sure that you remove the animals from the area of the leak if that's at all possible. I know that's not possible for them all, but they should be living elsewhere. Get veterinary care every 6 months, whether they need it or not, so that we can be proactive in monitoring, and keep really good records of your own. If you notice changes, document them. Keep a notepad, the date and time when you started to see changes. That will become important as well. Wildlife are equally going to be affected, and so it would be important for us to also monitor those. I'm suggesting that we do wildlife counts in the area, either by helicopter or on foot. If you see animals behaving abnormally, wildlife, don't approach them. Do call somebody to come out and take a look at them. And if you happen to find dead birds in particular, again, we don't want you to handle them, but you should call somebody to come and collect them. That would be important information for us to be able to collect. It was really very fast. I know I didn't have a lot of time, but I wanted to give you an overview. And we're not having questions now, right? So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tegzies. And everyone, he will be here at the end of the presentation if you have questions for him. I want to keep this moving, though, so I want to introduce you to our next doctor. It's Dr. Bardia Anvar. And Dr. Anvar is the director and founder of the Valley Urgent Care in Northridge. And Dr. Anvar has actually treated Porter Ranch residents already. Over 100 patients he's treated in the urgent care. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Anvar.
Thank you very much. Just by a show of hands, how many people here have had any symptoms? Wow, so almost everybody here has had some sort of symptoms from the gas leak. We get a lot of questions as to why are these specific symptoms happening, and people have different symptoms. So the first symptom, I'm going to start from head to toe, is people are complaining that they're having hair falling out. We have one person. So really what happens is we don't know exactly what is in this gas, but the benzene definitely does destroy cells, especially cells that are quickly replicating, like cells in your hair, cells in your airways, cells in your nose, cells in your ears. So those, and cells in your intestines that are constantly turning over. So that is why you may see hair loss. A lot of people are complaining that they're having nosebleeds almost on a daily basis. Is it from the irritation within the gas, or is it from some other chemicals that, such as the benzene, that are causing this? So you do have the nosebleeds. It's most likely due to the fact that there's less oxygen in the air. because that oxygen is being deprived by the gas that is in the air, which is not oxygen. The membranes are getting dry, they're getting irritated, so you will get the nosebleeds, you'll get the respiratory problems, people are getting asthma. So when you do develop, if you do develop asthma, you need to be on inhalers for the asthma. So I'm just kind of going down the symptoms. And then the other thing is a lot of people can become allergic to the actual gas itself. So you can have an allergic reaction. Those people most likely will have rashes on their bodies. If you do develop a rash, it's most likely an allergy to something that's in the gas. I know there's sulfur within the gas, which I'm not exactly sure if it's added or as they were saying, they add something so you can detect the gas. But people who have sulfur allergies can actually develop rashes and have problems. Then you have the nausea and the dizziness, which for the dizziness, we actually treat it like vertigo, so we give vertigo medications for the dizziness. The nausea is most likely due from the gases itself. We have the headaches. A lot of people are complaining about the headaches, and some people are developing migraine headaches, so we will usually treat the actual migraine. This is also related to the gases. So one thing I just want to make clear is that initially when patients were coming in, we would just reassure them and tell them, oh, don't worry. And even now the health department has said that, oh, you know, there shouldn't be any real health effects from these gases, maybe just an uncomfortable headache or something like that. We're seeing a lot more than that. So if you're having these symptoms and you think, oh, well, is it serious or is it not serious? Is it related to the gas or not? It probably is related to this. And the reason why I say that is two reasons. One, you could see by that graph that all the people who have symptoms are in what's called a cluster. And when you see a cluster of people having a certain kind of symptom, it's usually related to whatever is affecting them. So these clusters, which this whole room is almost a cluster because we're all from the same area, that's one way we know that it's related to this gas. The second thing, and more importantly, when people leave, most people when they leave, they feel better. Some people have long-term effects. They still have the asthma. It does take a few weeks. My number one recommendation is to leave the area. We even had somebody, he moved to Las Vegas, and he's having a good time staying at a hotel there, and the gas company's paying for it. But not to joke, but I really highly recommend getting out of the area. And now this is the other question I always get is, well, our clinic is in Northridge, so we get people from all over the place, and they say, well, I don't exactly live in Porter Ranch, but I'm having symptoms. And the unusual symptoms, definitely it's not normal to have a nosebleed every day. Well, some people say, I'm just tired. I feel, I just feel like I have the flu. If you're in you may have the flu, but if you've left your area and you feel better right away, it's most likely related to this, and you need to know that, and you need to make sure you get relocated. Other people have air purifiers and things like that, and I think if you have to stay in the area and you have to stay inside, that would probably be the best thing. People leave during the day because they live in Porter Ranch, then they come home at night and the effects come back. We're seeing a lot of that. The last thing I want to talk about, and I've been asked about this, well, is there a blood test? Is there a test that we could do? In our clinic, we are looking at different things we could do to identify if there's something we can test in people. The one thing that Dr. Texas spoke about, which I think is a good idea, is whomever your physician is to document what's going on with you. Make sure that they examine you. If you have children, that's very, very important. We don't know how this is going to affect children. And there could be, as I said, developing cells are the most affected, like your hair cells. Children are developing fast. Their brains are developing. Everything is developing. And I even know some children are still going to school in the area, which is And I'm hearing that they go on the playground and they have a nosebleed and they come back inside the classroom and the nosebleed goes away. So very, very important to follow this, is to be seen by a doctor, have this documented. As we were saying, chest x-rays, lymph node examinations, having a complete examination, because God forbid, if something does happen, you want to have a baseline of where you were at, because you don't want to come 2 or 3 or 4 years later and say, well, something happened, and you were never examined before, and we don't know, well, maybe that was normal, maybe it was abnormal for you, or what's going on. And I don't want to make anybody paranoid about this. So there's 2 forms of paranoia. One is to think, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? I don't want anyone to be worried about it. We haven't seen anything really serious, except for people who are obviously on the elderly, who are very sick, who are on oxygen, and they have a lack of oxygen. So I don't want anyone to be paranoid in that way. And I also don't want anyone to say, well, is this related to the gas leak or is it not? Do I just have a sore throat? Do I have the flu, or is it related to that? I would recommend being seen by a physician to make sure that what is it, and we can track that as physicians. Our clinic is not in Porter Ranch, and I know a lot of people have been relocated. We are in Northridge. We'd be happy to see anyone. If anyone has any questions, we did distribute some flyers about our clinic. And we are training all of our staff specifically about this so that we could see this. But this is actually a very serious health concern. And I am seeing a lot of patients in our clinic that have serious problems, but I'm also seeing out there that they're telling people, well, don't worry about it. It's just it's just an irritant, and it's just what we've added to the gas. And I don't want anyone to downplay their symptoms either. Take it seriously and be seen. Hopefully it's nothing. So thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anvar. He will be around after the presentation as well to answer questions. Like I said, I want to keep this moving, and I want to conclude, before we take questions, on relocation and displacement. So I'm going to call Patricia back up here, as well as Danielle Rabani, who is helping us with our clients relocate. She's been a tremendous help, and please join me in welcoming them up here.
So for most of you who have been working with our law firm, we have a case manager named Tom Phillips. If you haven't met him yet, he's been in the lobby. I don't see him in here, so he'll be in the lobby so you can meet him in person. But when we're dealing with relocation and reimbursement issues, we try to work with Tom so that he is answering the same questions in the same way for our clients. One of the things Tom's been doing is referring some relocation questions to Danielle, and I'm going to let her kind of bring you up to date with what happened in some of the meetings today with SoCalGas.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm a local real estate agent in Porter Ranch, and I'm also the head of relocation at RX Parris Law Firm, and I've helped relocate several families. And just this week, SoCalGas changed their policy on Tuesday, January 19th. They decided that they were no longer going to approve housing leases for 3 months. But then Michael Fuhr, the city attorney, told them that they can't do that. They need to continue relocating people to houses. So they reversed that decision, and now they're approving 2-month leases up until March 31st for housing. Now, this is a really challenging thing because the rental market, as most of you know, is very tight. There's very little inventory. And getting the homeowners to approve a 2-month lease is very hard. It was hard enough getting them to approve 3 months, but 2 months is going to be extremely hard. So the SoCalGas relocation companies, they are focusing on relocating people to hotels and motels. And I know that's crazy. A lot of you guys have pets, and some of the hotels, they're not accommodating for the pets. But if you can find a homeowner that's willing to do a 2-month lease, which is very hard to find, you could submit it to SoCalGas and they will consider it. This morning, I went to a meeting with Gillian Wright from SoCal Gas, and she assures me that she's very confident that they're going to have the well fixed by the end of February. So there's no reason to be doing these 3-month leases anymore. And they're going to stick with their decision to do 2 months because they're so confident that they're going to have it fixed. And we'll have to wait and see. Also, when you guys are considering whether you should stay, keep your house, or sell your house, there's not enough information right now, and there's not enough comps to go off of the house pricing exactly how much prices have decreased. So we have to wait and see when the first houses are sold where we stand price-wise. So you have to talk to your real estate agent and your attorney and just decide what's the best situation for you guys, because everyone's different. So you have to talk to your attorney.
And one thing as you're thinking about it, remember what we are hearing is that the banks aren't approving loans to houses in the 91326 zip code. So it's not possible for most people to come in and just buy a house. So even if you have it on the market, there's going to be a lot of other problems that you might be facing in trying to sell it. But I do think it important that you spend time talking to your family about your long-term values, and we'll be glad to be a part of any discussions about how that plays in with your legal rights. One thing that has come up is the mediation process for people trying to relocate. If you've been through it, you might know it's not much use. It kind of proves why we were objecting to the AQMD order, right? Because they have the system that looks like it's supposed to be good and fair, and then ultimately is useless. What I'm hearing is that, first of all, you can't have your lawyer with you. And second, they have about 2 or 3 minutes with the mediator who just basically says, well, SoCal Gas is trying, so just keep waiting and see what happens. Right? Now, I don't know if there's been any differences, but that's what we've heard. So we've not heard a lot of success on that process. I wanted to address a couple things quickly. We had mentioned at the last town hall that Sterling Van Lines would provide free storage for 6 months so that while you were evacuated, you had a place to store your property. Now, some people thought that they would also move it. And I wanted to make clear, Sterling is not moving for free. You can store for free. So that's an opportunity out there. For those of you trying to deal with shuffling your kids, there is a child care van service called Hop Skip Drive, and they're willing to make free driving available for kids in the community. So it's a whole kind of private bus system. And if you have questions about that, ask our law firms. We'll connect you with that. So that's kind of where things are with the relocation right now. And, I think we're here to answer questions afterwards. And are we going to do a Q&A out loud or coming up to people? We're going to do a couple out loud, and I'll let Robert take it from here.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Danielle. So ahead of tonight's meeting, we got a lot of questions that were sent in by people on our website. We just want to go through a few of those right now. And just by the way, this is an important issue everyone's been asking me, and I forgot to mention it. Validation, okay, for tonight is being provided. So upon exit, you get your ticket stamped, all right? That didn't get as big of applause as Bobby, but... All right, we're going to do it like this. So these questions are geared towards the doctors, and I just want to go through a few of these. One of our clients asked, I would like to know more about long-term health consequences and monitoring for both humans and pets. Doctors, could you touch a little bit on that?
Sure. So the long-term health consequences, we really worry about children and in the elderly. Especially in children, developmental problems, and in the elderly, we worry about them. And then, of course, hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone, but any of the cancers that affect the blood, like leukemia, things like that, hopefully that's not going to be an issue here. But those are the long-term healthcare consequences, and you should really, if you do have children, be very careful and make sure your children are well taken care of. Well, a
Just in
heart
case,
condition is
sorry,
very,
doctor. Everyone may not have heard that. Someone asked, "What about heart conditions?"
Okay, so that's actually a very good point. So heart conditions, you're going to have lower oxygen levels where you are because the gas displaces the oxygen. You may, if you develop chest pain, respiratory distress, anything like that is very, very dangerous. So yeah, it can affect your blood pressure because obviously your heart needs oxygen to pump. If your heart can't pump the oxygen, your blood pressure will go up, or it may drop, you may pass out. So be very, very careful.
The animal effects would be very similar. We're looking for increased incidences of infections. In cats in particular, I'd be very concerned about development of asthma. If you have pet birds, does anybody have pet birds in the room? They're very sensitive to gases or any type of airborne toxin, and so they run the risk of sudden death. Likewise, if they already have a pre-existing disease like heart disease or diabetes, it could worsen. And so having good care all along and monitoring for changes, but almost identical to what we'd expect in humans as well.
We got another question that said, "I would like to know more about what people in Northridge and neighboring communities are experiencing as far as health issues, including any issues with pets. I've been experiencing breathing problems for over a month, and both of my small dogs are coughing and more lethargic." And that's questions from Amanda.
I can start this one. So I'll address the pet concerns. The coughing and lethargy in the dogs is exactly what we've been seeing here as well. That's not unusual. The hope would be that once they're evacuated to somewhere away from the leak that these signs would start to diminish, but it can take a really long time, especially with respiratory tract irritation in a dog. It could take several months before you start to see improvement, and likewise their energy level might take a long time to come back. It's just really important to make sure that you're maintaining their health as well as possible. One thing that I failed to mention before is if you still have pets that are in the area, you shouldn't be exercising them there. You should be taking them somewhere else to take them on walks or hikes. That's just going to increase the load of toxin that they're inhaling and the potential damage to their airways. So it's really important. Exercise them inside. And, you know, as we all know, we like to be outdoors with our animals. Drive a distance away before you do that and take them elsewhere if you're going to exercise them hard.
Let's do one more question here before we conclude. I would like to know more about caring for my husband here at home. He is living with dementia, Parkinson's, with both memory and speech loss. It becomes a big concern as to whether or not we are even able to move away or sell our home with such a state of emergency in our Porter Ranch neighborhood. That's from Rosemary.
Well, like I was saying, in patients who have any kind of condition, Parkinson's disease or any other in the elderly, or anyone, I would recommend monitoring yourselves to see how is the, is there any decreased urine output or difficulty going to the bathroom. I would recommend everyone increasing intake of fluids that has been exposed to this to kind of flush out any toxins. So water is obviously the best thing, increasing the intake of water. Fish oils are very good for inflammation, to fight the inflammation, because all of your membranes are going to be inflamed and basically hurt. The fish oils help in the repair process. So it may even help with the breathing if you're out of the area and you're still having asthma and respiratory difficulties. Taking fish oils. In elderly, we even now recommend almost all the patients in the nursing homes to have a fish oil daily. So a lot of these stay in good health, get rest, a lot of common sense things. Try to have low stress levels. These will all help with these symptoms.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, we're going to be around here after we conclude. You can come up and ask us questions. We'll be out in the lobby. But seriously, thank you so much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.